Hello children, let me welcome you to the virtual class of the Brihan Mumbai Mahanagar Palika. My name is Shraddha teacher. Children, we are in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, and because of that we are not able to go to school, but that doesn't mean we are going to stop learning. So we are going to do many lessons which are very interesting from your textbook through the virtual class here. So let us do a lesson in English today. So children, let us start a lesson in Standard 9th English, and the name of the lesson is lesson number 4.2 from your English textbooks, that is the Storyteller. Now this is a very beautiful story about people traveling on the train. Now you might have gone to your native place sometimes by train. So when you travel on a train, you meet different people and you become friends also with them. All right. So now, as you can see here in the picture, there are a few people traveling on the train, and there are some children also. And you know that when you're traveling by train and if the journey is a really long one, you tend to get bored. So what do? You look outside the window for some time and then you read something. But then if the children are really small, then they might trouble their parents or their relatives to tell them stories. So this is what happened here. And then you will see how the elders who were there with these children told them some stories, some of which were interesting and some of which were not so interesting. So let us see what the story of the storyteller is. So this is a book which is written by H. Munro, and now he was called as Saki. That was his pen name. So whenever he used to write a book, he used to write it using his pen. So you have the same image over here again, where you can see a carriage in a train, and you can see two elders and three children. And out of the elders, one is a man and one is a woman, and the woman doesn't look very happy. She's sitting in the corner. Now, why is that so? Why is the woman not very happy? That we will learn as we see the contents of the story. Before going there, let us try and understand a little bit about the person who's written the story. That is the storyteller. Okay, so he was Hector Hugh Munro. He was born in 1870 and he passed away in 1916. He's a British writer. He was a person who was living in Britain. He's a British writer. He is often considered as a master of the short story. So he used to write short stories better than he used to write poetry or novels. So he's called as the master of the short story. His witty and sometimes grim stories, grim means very serious stories, satirize. What is the meaning of satirize? In a way, make fun of the society and culture of which he was a part. He has also written plays and novels. So this is some information in a short about our author or about the person who's written the story, that is Hector Hugh Munro. And Saki, as I told you, was his pen name. So let us now talk about stories before we actually proceed and we talk about the story, we read the story, we try to understand the story. Let us try to understand a little bit about stories. So stories can be of two types, children. Stories can be fictional stories or stories can be non-fictional stories also. Fiction means something which is part of your imagination, something which is you can say result of your imagination, whereas non-fiction means something which is based on real facts. So stories can be fictional also, it can be non-fictional also. For example, if you talk about stories like the Superman, Spider-Man, okay, or any of these fairy tales, they are all fictional stories. Story of Cinderella, they're all fictional stories. They are just a figment of the writer's imagination. Whereas if you talk about stories which are based on, you can say, certain real happenings, if you talk about stories based on Akbar Birbal, okay, or some stories based on history, then these are all non-fiction stories. Stories which are based on a real incident. The stories might have been changed a little bit to suit the situation, but then they are non-fictional stories. Now, why are we discussing about the types of stories? Because we have an exercise in the warming up part where we are supposed to match the type of story with its description. That is why we are trying to look at what the different kind of stories could be. Okay, so some stories could be fiction, others could be non-fiction. So here we have fiction means they are fake, means they are not part of any reality. They are imagined and they are part of someone's fantasy. For example, when we talk about Cinderella story, okay, when we talk about stories like Alice in Wonderland, we think and we imagine how Cinderella must have gone for the party, how she must have looked very beautiful, and how the pumpkin became a chariot. We have all heard these stories, isn't it? So they're all based on fake narratives. Then they are all imagined. Someone has imagined them to write them down. All right. And then they are based on someone's fantasy also. Now you must have seen the Hindi movie Tarzan the Wonder Car. As I guess most of you all must have seen it. So that story was about a car which could fly and which could do so many things. It could fight also with people. It could talk. Okay. So that is a fantasy. Fantasy means it's a dream. You dream that you have a car which can fly, but cannot be possible in real life. So this is the meaning of fiction. So now what is non-fiction? Non-fiction means real stories. Okay, stories based on the life of Shivaji Maharaj, stories based on the life of Prithviraj Chauhan. These are all real stories. They may contain true information from real life. Okay, even autobiographies are non-fiction. Autobiographies means when a person writes about his own life. Okay, a very famous person, when he writes about what all things have happened in his life as an inspiration to others, these autobiographies, they act as inspiration to others. So these are all types of non-fiction stories. Okay, so these are the different type of stories. You have fictions and then you have non-fictions. Now, like I told you, why are we discussing this? Because we have this exercise in our warming up part, the very first one, where they have said that short stories are of many different types. Okay, so the name of the story is written in column A and the description is written in column B. So let us try and find out whether you can match the name with the description. So now I will leave you to pause the video here for some time and try to match the answers yourself. And then you can come back and check your answers with mine. So see, under column A, you have anecdote, you have fable, you have a parable, myth, legend, fairy tale, tragic tale, fiction, farce, and satire. And then you have the descriptions. So come on, let's see what the meaning of an anecdote is. So an anecdote is a short, amusing account of an incident. So if a short and amusing incident has happened in my life, and if I'm narrating it to someone, then it is an anecdote. So what about a fable, children? A fable means it is a moral bearing story with animal characters. So you have Aesop's fables, you have stories from the Panchatantra. Okay, all these stories, at the end of the story, it gives you a certain kind of a moral. Okay, it tells you what values you're supposed to take away from that story. And usually in fables, you have animal characters. All right. Now, what's a parable? A parable means a message having some religious base or a moral. So, if you have messages or stories based on the life of Sri Krishna, if you have stories based on the life of Jesus Christ, all these are parables. What about a myth? A myth is something which has got, again, historical base, but the characters may not be true. Myth, we also call it as mythology sometimes. Okay, characters may or may not be true, but the characters may have some kind of historical background. And then you have a legend. So what is a legend? A legend has originated in the ancient times, and legends are usually stories which are orally passed from one generation to another. So you really don't know who is the person who's created the story. For example, the storyteller, we know it is H. Munro who has written the story. But as far as legends go, you do not know who is the author of these legends. Then you have fairy tales. All of us know what are fairy tales. So fairy tales are tales where there are characters who are supernatural.
Okay, and there is also moral hamesha, always, for the children in fairy tales. What about a tragic tale? Now, as soon as you read the word tragic, you know that the word tragic has come from the word tragedy. Now, what is a tragedy? A tragedy means something which is very sad. So, a tragic tale means it has got a serious ending and it ends in a tragedy. Something bad happens. Not something good or favorable, but something not very much, you don't like things. Those kind of things, when they happen, it is called as a tragedy. Fiction, of course, we discussed now. So, what is a fiction? It is untrue, but it could be realistic. You will feel that it is real, but it is untrue. What about farce? Farce means what? Farce means where there is exaggerated comedy. There is comedy, but it is over the top. It is exaggerated. If you have seen shows on television, like for example, if you have seen the Kapil Sharma show, there you will see that it is farce. It is exaggerated comedy. People come dressed as men, men come dressed as women, women come dressed as men. All right, and there is comedy which is exaggerated. And then what about satire? Satire is when vices and folly are ridiculed, when you make fun of the bad things. Okay, that time it is said that it is satire. So, see, stories or short stories could be of so many different types. You could have anecdotes, you could have fable, parable, myth, legend, fairy tale, tragic tale, fiction, farce, satire. You can have many more types of stories also, children, but we are looking at only the points which are there in the textbook this time. Okay, so this was about the types of story. Now we are supposed to complete a story as well. Okay, now there is a story called The Footprint. Now, this story also has got some kind of moral to it, but here, along with reading and understanding the story, you will see certain words which are put in the bracket. Okay, now you have to complete the story by using these particular words in their proper form. So, all the words which are there in the bracket, they are all different verbs. Okay, for example, see, have is a verb, dream is a verb, walk is a verb, belong is a verb, flash is a verb, observe is a verb. So, all these are verbs. So, what you are supposed to do is you are supposed to use these particular words, verbs to fill up that particular blank, but then the verb should be in its proper form. Okay, let me give you one example and then you can pause the video and try to figure out the answers for yourself. So, one night a man have a dream. So, if you write have a dream, will the sentence be right grammatically? No, it won't be. What about if you write one night a man has a dream? That also sounds wrong. So, what is the correct form of the word have that you will use over here? It is had. So, when I say one night a man had a dream, see, when you're saying a story, you're telling it in the past, isn't it? So, had is the right form of the verb have here. Okay, so in this way, you will complete the other sentences also. So let me leave you here for a second to pause and try to find out the answers yourself. Alright, so come on, let's see the remaining answers now and let us try to understand what the story is. So one night a man had a dream. He dreamt that, see again the past tense of the word dream. He dreamt that he was walking along the beach with God. Okay, so this is a fiction. All right, you cannot walk with God. He was walking along the beach with God. Across the sky flashed scenes from his life. For each scene, he noticed two sets of footprints in the sand. One belonged to him and the other to God. So I hope you understand what the story is. He has a dream, a person that he's walking, and there is God also walking with him. And he noticed that there are two sets of footprints. And naturally, when God is there with you, there are two people. You will see two sets of footprints, and one belonged to him and the other belonged to God. After the last scene flashed, he looked back at the footprints in the sand. He observed that many times along the path of his life, there was only one set of footprints, and that it happened at the saddest, most troubled times of his life. The D has come down, that's a printing mistake. The D should go up, okay? He questioned God about it. God, you said that once I decided to follow you, you would walk with me all the way. So I don't understand why you left me alone when I needed you the most. God replied, during your times of trials and sufferings, where you saw only one set of footprints, they were mine, for it was then that I carried you in my arms. So you see how you should have unshakable faith in God. This person, he questioned God, and he felt that when his times were most difficult, there was only one set of footprints. So he had come to the conclusion that when there were difficult times in my life, maybe God left my side, he abandoned me. But then how did God assure him? God said that no, that was not the case. He said that when you were in the difficult times of your life, I was carrying you on my shoulders. Okay, so this is how we have said a story also, and we have tried to use the verbs in their proper forms also. All right, now let us move on and let us come to our story. So this story is set in a railway carriage. Okay, a railway carriage, as you see, is part of a train. Okay, now this is set in the, now you know this author was living in the 18th century. So 17th and 18th century. So maybe the story was written in those times when the railway carriages and the trains looked like this. It was a hot afternoon. Okay, the story was happening, the setting was a hot afternoon. And the the train was running along the tracks, and the next stop was Temple Combe, and it was almost an hour ahead. So there was 1 hour now to reach Temple Combe station. So that in those times there were no mobiles, you could not watch movies on your mobile, you could not listen to songs. So naturally, the people who were there in the train, they would get bored. So now who were the occupants of the train? There was a small girl, a smaller girl, and a small boy, along with their aunt. So you can see the aunt looks so serious, and all these children, they were along with their aunt. They were going somewhere along with their aunt. There was also a stranger. Now, a stranger is a person whom you do not know. Okay, he was a bachelor. A bachelor is a person who's not married. So he is not married, so he does not have too much of, you can say, experience with taking care of children. Now, the aunt and the children were talking with each other. That is, the children were asking a lot of questions, and the aunt was actually not replying to their questions also, but at the same time, the aunt was forbidding them from asking questions. She was always talking to them in the negative. She was always saying, don't do this, don't do that. And children used to reply back asking why I should not do this, why I should not do that. Okay, now the bachelor, he was a little disturbed by all this, but he did not say anything. And the aunt used to constantly keep telling the children, don't do this, don't look out of the window, don't go near the door. So this was a constant conversation which was happening. The children were going on asking questions. For example, see in this picture, you will see that there are some sheep outside. Let's see this picture. You will see there are some sheep outside. Okay, in the first picture that we saw. Here, there are some sheep outside the window. All right. So the children would look out of the window and the children would say, why are those sheep there in the field? And the aunt would say that they are being driven from there, maybe because they want to go to another field and eat more grass. And finally, the aunt would get fed up of answering the questions of these children. Okay. So now we saw how this is the situation. It is a hot afternoon also. So naturally, when it is a hot afternoon, you tend to get a little bit upset also. You get a little tired also, physically as well as emotionally. Okay. So continuously the children were asking questions and the aunt was getting annoyed. Finally, the children told the aunt to tell her a story. All right. The children started telling the aunt, come on now, tell us a story. Now, during this time, the bachelor's face was getting upset. He was getting upset. He did not say anything, but he was getting upset because of all the noise and all the questions and all the, you can say, commotion which the children were creating in the tree. Finally, the aunt said to the children, come over here and listen to a story. So now the aunt told the children a story. Now, this story, when you hear, after we finish completing the story, you will realize that it is set on a hot, sultry means very hot, railway carriage where there is a bachelor, three children, and a strict aunt. The aunt begins telling the children a story which is very boring, and the children only get more restless because of the story that the aunt tells them. Okay, so you can see here the aunt is telling the children the story, and the children are not very happy or convinced with the story. And you can see the bachelor sitting here. The bachelor is also now listening to the story. Okay, and he is also getting bored. So now what is the story about? She says that there is a girl. She begins a very unenterprising. Unenterprising means very dull story. Okay, about a little girl who was good and she made friends with everyone. All right. And because of her goodness, she was finally saved from a mad bull by a number of rescuers who admired her moral character. So there was this girl who was a really, really very, very good girl. She was very obedient. She talked to everyone. She made friends with everyone. And one day she was attacked by a mad bull. When she was attacked by a mad bull, immediately all the people they came to her rescue and they saved her from the mad bull. The children were really, really bored. Okay, they asked her aunt, wouldn't they have saved her if she hadn't been good? Because it is a normal thing. When someone is being attacked by an animal, or when someone is in trouble, others rush to help that person without even thinking whether this person is good or bad. So now the children were really, really bored with the story. Okay, the aunt said, okay, she would have been helped, but then the children said, it is the stupidest story that we have ever heard. So see, the children are also not agreeing with their aunt. The children are also not ready to listen to the story that their aunt is telling them. They said it's a very, very boring story. Then the old man says, the bachelor says, okay, now let me tell you one story. And then the bachelor begins by telling the story. He also starts by saying that there was a girl who was very, very good. That is, she was extraordinarily good. Now, when he starts the story in this way, the children again get bored. But he says, don't worry, my story has got a twist and I will tell you what the story is about. Okay, so he tells them that this particular girl, she was so good that she would listen to her mother and she would eat the milk pudding that her mother would serve for her. Okay, and she would do her homework on time. She was very punctual in all her work. All right, she was also very polite and she was very well mannered. So she was a very, very good girl. Along with this, she was very good in studies also, and she had got many medals also for her good behavior. Okay, so now the children are saying, wow, she's got so many medals. They say, yes, she used to always wear the medals around her neck. And she used to go, wherever she used to go, she used to wear the medal around her neck. So that is why he tries to say that the girl was a very, very good girl. One day, the prince came to know about this particular girl, and then the prince told his, you can say, minister that this girl should be allowed to play in the royal garden. All right. Now, the royal garden was a place where only adults could go. It was a very, very beautiful park, but no children were allowed to go into the park. But this girl, she was allowed to go into the park because she was so good. Okay. And there were a lot of plants, there were a lot of flowers in the park. So there were many animals also in the park. All right. The prince, he said, he was not very sure whether the animals would keep the plants, whether the animals would allow the plants to grow well. So he had ordered the people that there would be no flowers in the park because the animals would eat up all the flowers. Okay. So now the prince allowed this girl to go and play in the garden. Now the girl's name was Bertha, and she enjoyed. There were ponds also, ponds with beautiful gold and red and blue and yellow fish in the pond. And there were beautiful trees on which there were many parrots also, and there were lots of birds also. Now Bertha was enjoying walking in the garden or walking in this particular park. She also had a lot of her medals also around her neck. So whenever she was walking, the medals were clinking against each other. All right. And the medals, the sound of those medals, the clinking of those medals reminded her that she was a really, really good girl. But suddenly there was a twist in the story. There was an enormous wolf who came into the park to see whether he could catch some animals for supper. Supper is a meal. Okay? And the first thing that he saw was Bertha. Now, Bertha got very scared of the wolf and she ran and she hid behind a shrub. Now, see, you can see her medals also on her neck. Now, she hid behind the shrubs. The wolf started searching for her. But that particular shrub, it was of a myrtle, and the myrtle shrub has a lot of smell. So the wolf was not able to smell her. But what happened was, because she was trembling with fear, the medals in her neck were clinking. Okay? And the wolf suddenly he heard the sound of the medals and he stopped to listen. Again they clinked, and then the wolf was able to locate where Martha is. He dashed into the bush and he ate Martha. Okay, see, he pounced on her and he devoured her. Devoured is a word which is used in the book. That means he finished eating her. What was left? See, you can see how she's hiding. Okay, see, here she is hiding from the wolf. Now, the wolf couldn't smell her because of the strong smell of the myrtle shrub, but the wolf heard the sound of her medals. So, what was left of Bertha were just her shoes and her medals and some bits of her clothing. The wolf ate up the girl who was supposed to be very good, and she had won so many medals also. And the medals, in fact, were the things which led to her death. Okay, so this is how the story ended. The story had a beautiful beginning, but it ended this way. The children were very, very happy, but they said this is the most beautiful story that we have ever heard. So, what was the main idea behind telling the story? The story was not boring for the children. Why it was not boring? Because the end was not predictable. The end of the story, which the aunt had said, was very predictable, that the girl was very good, so she got saved. But here the main idea behind the story of the bachelor was not only good things happen to good people. So you might be a very good person, but bad things could happen to you too. So that is the main idea of the story, the storyteller. All right, children. So this was the entire story. So now this is a long lesson. You know the story was in two parts. So we will try to end the video here because we've already taken more than half an hour. What we will do is when I will come back with another video based on this lesson, we will talk about the various activities or exercises which are there in your English workshop part. But that will be part 2 of this video. So this is all for today. So what did we see? We talked about the different kind of stories. Okay. We also talked about how you write the correct forms of the verbs in sentences. And then we saw the storyteller, the story in detail. The main moral of the story was even if you're very good, bad things can happen to you. So that is all for today, children, in this video. Very soon, I will be coming up with the next video where we will look at the remaining part of this lesson.
So children, wasn't that a very interesting lesson? I'm sure you learnt a lot of new things in this lesson. If you have liked this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to my video so that you will get to see all the videos which I keep posting regularly.